Hello, good morning to everybody. Today we are going to discuss about the stress distribution in soil due to surface loads. Before we talk the stresses in homogeneous mass by the Bosniak theory, I would like to briefly introduce about how the stress distribution is going to be taking place in the soil with the help of neat diagram. Suppose let us consider plane surface. When a load is applied to the soil surface, let us call this one as Q. It increases the vertical stress within the soil mass. Suppose if we are interested to find out the vertical stress at point P, the vertical stress is represented as sigma z. With the increase in the depth, the vertical stress is going to get reduced. It will be maximum at the top and it goes on reducing at the point P. So you always have to remember the increased stress are greatest directly under the loaded area, especially at this particular point. The stress exerted due to the load coming over the pavement surface is going to be maximum, and it is going to reduce with increase in the depth at the lower layers. Or here, if you are trying to consider a Bosniak's theory for the solution, the soil mass is considered to be homogeneous, isotropic, elastic, and a single layer. We're going to discuss that at the later stage. What does it mean? There are no different layers present above the soil subgrade. Many theories have been developed for determination of the vertical stress or different types of stresses in the soil. The theory of elasticity have been used to compute the stresses in the soil. Okay, now let us have the brief introduction. Estimation of vertical stresses at any point in a soil mass due to external vertical loadings are of great importance or great significance in the prediction of settlements of the buildings, bridges, embankments, and many other structures. Equations have been developed to compute the stresses at any point in a soil mass on the basis of theory of elasticity. On the basis of theory of elasticity, the equations are being developed for finding out the different types of stresses that are acting in a soil mass due to the presence of vertical load acting over the plane surface of the ground, which we have to remember. According to elastic theory, constant ratios exist between stresses and strains. I'm going to express stress as sigma and strain as epsilon. So if I'm trying to remove this constant of proportionality, I have the Young's modulus of elasticity as a constant in between. The constant of proportionality can be called as capital E, which is called as Young's modulus of elasticity, which we are going to discuss at a later stage. For the theory to be applicable, the real requirement is not that the material necessarily be elastic, but there must be a constant ratios between stresses and corresponding strains. Also, you should be remembering whenever the load is applied to the soil surface, as you know that it increases the vertical stress within the soil mass. The increased stresses are greatest directly under the loaded area but extend indefinitely in all the directions. The formulas that are most widely used are the Bosniak's and the Westergaard's formulae. These formulas were first developed for point loads acting at the surface. These formulas have been integrated to give the stresses below the uniform strips loads and rectangular loads. What I mean to say is the formula for determination of vertical stress was been first determined by the Bosniak and Westergaard's theory, and that too it was been developed by the Bosniak for the point load for determination of vertical stress that is acting in the soil mass sigma z, and later this point load has been integrated to get the load acting due to the uniformly distributed wheel to give the stresses below the uniform strip of loads or rectangular loads. Let us discuss about the Bosnick's formula for point loads. So, if you try to consider now, let us see this particular figure which shows a load Q acting at point O on the surface of a semi-infinite solid. This is considered to be a semi-infinite solid. This is semi-infinite solid. A semi-infinite solid is the one bounded on one side by the horizontal surface. See, if you try to consider the whole soil mass, whatever the stress is like to be acting, it can be towards negative x direction, positive x direction, positive y direction, not positive y direction, negative y direction, negative x direction, positive x direction, negative y direction, but it cannot be along positive y direction. Why? Because the earth is considered to be a boundary. The earth is considered to be a boundary. That's why it is called as semi-infinite. It is not infinite on all the particular direction. It is semi-infinite because the earth is having the boundary restricting any stress to get acted in the positive y direction above the surface. The problem of determining stress at any point P. Let us consider this point P somewhere in the soil mass, not exactly along the vertical axis. Let us assume that this point P has been at the depth of Z. The Z is measured from the finite layer. The surface of the earth is considered to be a solid. This horizontal surface is considered to be a boundary, except from this layer the stress is going to be distributed in all other direction infinitely. Also, we must be knowing this point P is located at a radial distance of r from the central vertical axis at the depth of Z from the semi-infinite layer of the ground. Why this is called a semi-infinite? Because this particular ground is considered to be a boundary below which the stresses are going to be acting in all the possible direction infinitely, but we cannot be expecting any stress to be developed above this surface in the vertical positive y-axis. So we may be expecting the resultant of all these stresses, strains to be acted over negative x-axis, positive x-axis, negative y-axis, and any inclinations in between in third quadrant or else in the fourth quadrant, but may not be expecting any stresses or strains to develop in the first quadrant or else in the second quadrant if you try to consider the whole surface of the earth. The whole surface of the earth means into the space we may be expected to see the first quadrant and second quadrant. Therein may not be finding any kinds of stresses and strains. So that's why whatever the loads that are acting over the surface of semi-infinite layer of the ground, it tries to induce the stress and strain within the soil mass. So for solving the problem for determination of stress at any point P at a depth Z separated by a radial distance of r, the Bosnick in 1885 had assumed the following assumptions. The soil mass is elastic, isotropic, homogeneous, and semi-infinite. Very important. We are going to study about the elasticity, isotropic, homogeneous and semi-infinite in the first slide. See, what do you mean by homogeneous material? Homogeneous material is a material of uniform composition throughout that cannot be mechanically separated into different materials. Examples of homogeneous materials are certain types of plastics, ceramics, glass, metals, alloys, paper, board and resins. What I mean to say, once again I repeat, homogeneous material are those materials of uniform composition throughout which cannot be mechanically separated into different forms, different materials. Okay, what do you mean by isotropic material? Isotropic material means a material having identical values of property in all the directions. What I mean to say, the properties, it is with respect to the elastic property of the material. Isotropic material means a material having identical values of elastic property of that particular material in all the possible directions. Glass and metals are the best examples of isotropic material. Now we should also be understanding what you mean by the Hooke's law. Hooke's law states that strain in a solid is proportional to the applied stress within the elastic limit of that solid. I repeat, Hooke's law states that a strain in a solid is proportional to the applied stress within the elastic limit of that solid. So what does it mean? Let us take an example here. If you try to consider the length of this spring as L, whenever it is not loaded, in the first case the length of the spring remains as L. Once if the spring is loaded with certain force of F, the spring is going to get expanded to a vertical depth of x. So what will be the total length here? Up to this part it will be L, and due to the extension to a depth of x due to the applied force F, the length of extension will be L plus x. Now if you are going to once again consider the same spring which is going to be subjected to the magnitude of force equal to 2F, at that time what are you going to expect? Till this part you will be expecting the length of this particular spring to be L plus x, and there will be a additional extension of x in the downward direction. So the total length of this expansion will be L plus 2x. So due to the increase in the force, what has happened? The length L has changed its extension to L plus x. Due to the application of the force 2F, the extension of the spring has changed its magnitude L plus x to L plus 2x. This indicates with the applied force F, there will be an extension of the spring. So with the applied force F, the extension is going to be directly proportional. With the increase in the force F, extension of the spring is also going to increase. So we can correlate this concept of force directly proportional to extension with respect to the stress that is going to be applied to the spring directly proportional to the strain. What do you mean by stress? Stress can be expressed as force upon area, F upon A. This is nothing but called a stress, which is acting in the downward direction. What is strain? Strain is nothing but the change in length compared to its original length. What is this? This is X, this is L. We have considered this to be L here. So what is the change in length to its original length? That is nothing but the strain. The ratio of change in length to its original length can be called as strain. So I'm going to call this strain delta L divided by L. Delta L is nothing but, what is delta L? Delta L is L minus of L plus X divided by L. What are you going to get? L plus L minus L will be getting minus X upon L. What is the extension of this particular spring? X. With respect to the original length, what is the extension of this particular spring? X. This is called a strain developed due to the force applied. What is the force or the stress applied? Stress sigma is equal to F upon A, force upon area. Suppose if this force is going to be doubled, what is going to happen? L plus, in this figure I told you that this is L plus X, and due to the magnitude of force that is double than that of previous one, there will be a further more extension, which we may call this one as L plus 2x. So it will be minus of 2x. So with a increase in the force, where the magnitude of force has been increased from F to 2F, the strain value has got increased to minus x to minus 2x. What does it indicate? That clearly describes stress is directly proportional to strain, but the condition is stress is directly proportional to strain only within the elastic limit. Okay, suppose if you try to remove this proportionality constant, I'm going to introduce capital E epsilon. What is this capital E? This is called as Young's modulus of elasticity. Capital E is equal to ratio of what? Stress upon strain. Stress upon strain. I am going to write it here. Capital E, which is nothing but the Young's modulus of elasticity, nothing but ratio of stress upon strain. So can you find this curve which is varying linearly? If you try to plot the curve of strain along x-axis, stress along y-axis, due to this linearity, what is going to happen? Whenever the stress is increasing, the strain is also increasing. Whenever the stress is increases, the strain is also increases up to this particular point. What is this point called as? This point is called as elastic limit. Beyond that, you may not be expected the proportionality to get existed. You may not be calling the stress is proportional to a strain beyond the elastic limit. This is called as yield point. So what you remember, for whatever the stresses that are acting over the body, the strain that is developed, it will be proportional with respect to the applied stress within the elastic limit. So now what is elasticity? You have to understand, whenever the force is going to be applied, there will be extension in the downward direction with its increase in the length of x. In the first figure, which you can see, from L it will change to L plus x. due to the force applied F. So soon after removal of this force, what is going to happen to the spring? It tries to regain its original shape and size. Once again, if it's regain its original shape and size to become a length of L in magnitude soon after removal of the load, then this particular material is trying to be said that is obeying the elasticity. Suppose soon after removal of the vertical load, if this material will not regain its original shape and size back to its original position to achieve the original length L, then that material is called as plastic material. So I repeat, whenever the force is going to be applied, there will be extension in the downward direction. Soon after removal of that load, the material should regain its original shape and size to call it to be an elastic material. If the material doesn't regain its original shape and size, that particular material can be classified under plastic material. So we had understood about the elastic property, isotropic property, homogeneous property, and semi-infinite property of the material. So what is elastic property? After removal of the load, if any material tries to regain its original shape and size, that property of the material is called elastic property. If soon after removal of load, material doesn't change, regain its original shape and size, that particular material can be classified under plastic material. What do you mean by isotropic property? The property of the material doesn't change in any direction. This is called as isotropic property. What type of property we are trying to refer here? The Young's modulus of elasticity is one of the property of the material which doesn't change with respect to the direction. What do you mean by homogeneous? Homogeneous is nothing but a material which is having uniform composition throughout, which cannot be mechanically separated into different materials. That is called as homogeneous. What is called as semi-infinite? This is called as semi-infinite layer. Why this is so? Because you may be finding infinite directions below the ground surface, but you may not be expected to see the infinite directions above this ground surface. Why? But this is not possible because I am considering this layer of the ground as solid boundary. So that's why if you try to consider this as a whole space, this is considered to be a semi-infinite body. Why this is semi-infinite body? We are considering infinite depth in the downward direction, infinite width in the lateral direction, but we are not calling infinite height above the ground surface. That's called as semi-infinite. If you are going to expect the finite elements in all the possible directions, then this could be called as finite material, infinite material, completely infinite material. Now this is semi-infinite because of there is a presence of boundary due to the what? A rigid surface of ground. Now very important, one more concept we should be studying is Poisson's ratio. What do you mean by Poisson's ratio? Let us study that with the example here. Poisson's ratio is a measure of the Poisson's effect that describes the expansion or contraction of a material in the directions perpendicular to the direction of loading. What does it mean? It is nothing but the ratio of lateral strain to linear strain. Suppose let us take an example here in the first figure. Initially, if you try to consider the shape of the cylinder with the help of dashed lines. Suppose if the force tensile load E is going to be applied, what type of tensile load? Stretching load. What type of force is going to be applied on the cylinder? It's a tensile load. Due to that, what is going to happen? Initially, the diameter of the cylinder was d0. Now the diameter is going to get reduced to small d, due to which the initial length L0 changes to L. So what does it indicate? Due to the applied force, either stretching or compressing, there will be changing dimensions in the lateral direction. I repeat, due to the applied force, the force that is acting over the cylinder is having the property of tensile load. Due to that, the cylinder is getting compressed. But at the same time, there will be an increase in the length of the cylinder from L0 to L due to change in the diameter from D0 to D. So how it can be represented? Poisson's ratio is defined as a measure of expansion or contraction of the material in directions perpendicular to direction of loading. Suppose if you can consider this as a linear strain is given by, always you remember the strain is expressed by change in length to the original length. What is change in length here? L0 minus L or L minus L0. L is greater compared to that of L0. That's why I am trying to deduct L minus of L0 instead of L0 minus L divided by its original length. What is the original length? L0. What is the lateral strain? Here the lateral strain is change in the diameter to its original diameter. What is change in diameter? D0 minus D. D0 minus D divided by D0. So if you try to take up the ratio of lateral strain with respect to the linear strain, this gives the Poisson's ratio, which we are going to express it as mu. In the other example, if you try to apply the lateral strain, compressive nature, initially the member of the beam will be having this shape. Due to the application of a lateral strain, it gets compressed, hence the initial length L will change to L dash. Okay, so with the help of this figure, we will be understanding the Poisson's ratio is nothing but the lateral strain is nothing but the ratio of lateral strain to the longitudinal strain, which gives us an idea of the expansion or contraction of material in the directions perpendicular to the direction of loading. If you try to compress, it will try to increase in its length. If you try to expand, it will try to get compressed. If you try to compress, it will try to expand. If you try to just expand, it will get compressed. So it will be the ability of the material to get either compressed or expanded perpendicular to the direction of loading. So simply the Poisson's ratio is expressed as a ratio of lateral strain to the linear strain. Which one is considered a lateral strain? It's a usual practice to consider the strains along y-axis as lateral and strains along x-axis as longitudinal. So with this we understood the Poisson's ratio. Now how are we going to calculate the stress by the Bosnick's theory? Let us have the slide for determination of the stress to be calculated with the help of formula. Sigma z could be calculated by P upon 2 pi 3 z cube divided by r square plus z square raised to 5 by 2. Sigma r can be calculated with this formula. Sigma t can be calculated by this formula. Tau zr, which is nothing but a shear stress, can be calculated from this formula. These are all the stresses, and how do the strains are going to be measured? Epsilon z is a vertical strain calculated by this formula. Epsilon r radial strain, epsilon t tangential strain, and this is the vertical deflection, and this is the horizontal deflection. Whatever the tick marks I have made over the formulas, they are very important for calculating the vertical stress in the direction z, direction r, direction t, and also the formulas which are useful for calculating the strains are epsilon z, epsilon r, epsilon t. And the deflections can be calculated vertically by W. Horizontal deflection can be calculated by U. You should remember the Poisson's ratio for different materials are mu is equal to 0 for cork and mu is equal to 0.5 for incompressible rubber. Now we are considering the value of mu is equal to 0.5 for the soil by assuming the soil to be incompressible. So what does it mean? Actually, with this Poisson's ratio value of mu is equal to 0, as you know that nothing but the ratio of what? Lateral strain by longitudinal strain. Whenever you can expect to apply the lateral strain, there won't be any longitudinal strain. Whenever you want to apply the compressive strain, may not be expected to see the longitudinal strain to be developed. So hence the value of mu is equal to 0 for all those materials if it doesn't get deformed. If there are no compressions in the body, if there are no expansions or tension in the body, we can consider such kind of material as cork, where the value of mu is equal to 0. Just it doesn't changes in its volumetric shape in the lateral direction nor in the vertical direction due to the applied stress. Do not get confused with the strain as well as stress. This is stress and this is strain. Stress is calculated by force upon area and strain is calculated by change in length to its original length. Poisson's ratio is given by lateral strain divided by longitudinal strain. Hooke's law. With respect to that, the stress is directly proportional to strain. After removal of this particular proportionality constant, we are going to introduce Young's modulus of elasticity as the constant, which is given by ratio of stress by strain. This is Hooke's law. And this is Poisson's ratio. The Hooke's law is going to be obeyed for all the materials up to elastic limit. Poisson's ratio values are going to vary from 0 to 0.5 depending upon the compressibility of the substance after it is going to be stressed, whether it is getting lateral strain or longitudinal strain. With respect to that, we will be having the values of mu 0 varying till 0.5. I repeat, when this mu is going to be 0, when there is no lateral strain, we can consider this one as 0. When there is no longitudinal strain, again can consider this one as 0. Hence, the value of this Poisson's ratio mu is going to approach the value of 0. Just like the cork which is going to be plugged into the bottle neck of a whiskey. So due to that, it will provide better fit in the bottle, which doesn't cause the bottle to get crack due to increase in the volume of the cork material by absorption of the moisture or by application of stress. Now we're going to see what are the important formulas we have to remember for finding out the vertical stress in the soil mass whenever the load is acting at the axis of symmetry. And the type of the load which we are considering here is uniformly distributed circular load. Sigma z is to be found out by this formula. And remember that whenever you try to find out the stresses at the axis of symmetry, at the vertical axis of symmetry, sigma r is equal to sigma t1. The radial distance r is equal to 0. What does it mean? Suppose if you try to see a uniformly distributed load, let us say this one as q, the central point of this particular uniformly distributed load, circular load in the z direction at point P is acting with radial distance r is equal to 0, because in the previous case we have seen this particular P was being located somewhere at a distance of r when the point load is going to be present over the surface of the semi-infinite layer. This was the case when we have studied the formulas that are being used for finding out the stress at this particular point P at depth Z separated by distance R, where R value was not equal to 0. We had found the separate equations for calculating sigma R as well as sigma T. Now whenever this R value happen to be equal to 0 at the axis of symmetry, we have to assume or consider or remember sigma R is always equal to sigma T. Now what is called as R here? R is nothing but the radial distance of separation of this particular point P considered in the soil mass. If it is exactly lying in the vertical plane along the center line of this circular load, then the radial separation distance R is equal to 0. Suppose somewhere, if for example this point P is separated by a distance of say around 2, R is equal to 2. What does it mean? This particular point 2, this particular point P is located at a distance of radial distance of 2 meters away from the central axis of the symmetry. At that time, we may not be expected to consider the condition which we had seen, sigma R will never be equal to sigma T when R is not equal to 0. Okay, now let us come back to the Bosnick solution for a point load acting over the semi-infinite layer. This is a point load P, and you may be expecting to calculate the sigma Z, sigma R, sigma T, because this particular point P has been considered somewhere at a distance R, from the central axis. So hence we may be expected to calculate sigma R and sigma T. If this point load is considered to be integrated and formed as a circular loading due to the applied V load on the surface of the ground, the pavement, and at this particular point, whenever this R happen to be equal to 0, you may be expecting sigma R is equal to sigma T. And you should also remember that the shear stress, and by the time shear stress is also equal to 0. So whenever there is no presence of shear force, whatever the stresses that are acting over the surface normal to the plane, in absence of shear stress, they are called as principal stresses. Hence, what are the principal stresses? Here the principal stresses are sigma Z and sigma R. Why? Because see, for any body, if you try to consider this as a body here, if any stress is acting normal to the surface, could I call this one as normal stress? When this could be called as principal stress? Wherever the shear stresses are considered to be equal to 0, these normal stresses can be called as principal stress. So what type of stress you can expect in the Z direction? Sigma Z. What type of stress you can expect in the this one is called as sigma R, and this one is called as sigma T. Okay, so what does it mean? There are 3 different types of stresses acting over a body. Sigma Z in the vertical direction, sigma r in the radial direction, sigma t in the tangential direction. So I told you sigma r is equal to sigma t whenever r is equal to 0 at the axis of symmetry. And the load is going to be acting over the surface, either it might be a point load or it might be a uniform distributed load along its axis of symmetry if any point is located in the soil mass for which we are interested to find out the vertical stress. Thereby sigma z can be calculated with the use of formula, and sigma r and sigma t, whatever the values you are going to see, they are going to have the same values with respect to analytical calculations or by referring to the Hallwin's charts. Now let us have the talk on stresses in homogeneous mass by the Bosnick's theory. If the soil subgrade, subbase and surfacing layers in the pavement are assumed to form a homogeneous mass, the analysis of the stresses can be greatly simplified. By this time you know what you mean by homogeneous mass, which are nothing but uniform composition throughout, material which are having uniform composition throughout, which cannot be mechanically separated into different materials. They are called as homogeneous. So if the subgrade, subbase and surface layers in the pavement are assumed to form a homogeneous mass, the analysis of stresses can be greatly simplified. In 1855, Bosnick analyzed the distribution of stresses in an ideal elastic, homogeneous, isotropic solid obeying the Hooke's law, and presented equations for horizontal and vertical stresses in such a material under a load. By this time you have understood about elastic, homogeneous, isotropic, what do you mean by Hooke's law, and what do you mean by Poisson's ratio. So in 1855, Bosnick analyzed the distribution of stresses in an ideally elastic, homogeneous, isotropic solid obeying the Hooke's law, and presented equations for horizontal and vertical stresses in such a material under the load. The vertical stresses under load at any horizontal section decreases from the maximum at the point located directly beneath the load to 0 at a very large distance from this point. So what does it indicate? If you try to consider any load that is acting over the surface, it might be a point load or uniformly distributed load, from this particular point in any radial horizontal direction, the vertical stresses is going to get decreased from the maximum at the point located directly beneath the load to 0 at a very large distance from this particular point. So this will be 0, which is going to be at a very large distance in the horizontal section. Maximum will be at the center, 0 at the very large distance in the horizontal direction. That's what it means. The vertical stress goes on decrease in the horizontal direction. Not only in the horizontal direction, it decreases in the vertical direction with increase in the depth. But where it will be maximum? The point of contact between the V load as well as the pavement surface. Okay, now we want to explain about the type of pressure distribution. The pressure distribution diagram, it tries to be seen like a bulb shape. This is called as isobars. Once if you try to see any type of uniform distributed load or point load acting over the surface, how does the stress is going to look like? It will be in the form of bulb shape. Maximum at the top, minimum at the bottom. Isobars are nothing but they are the contour lines joining the stresses of equal magnitudes. Now, what are the assumptions of Bosnick's theory? The soil is homogeneous without any stratification. The soil is considered to be isotropic, linearly elastic, which obeys the Hooke's law. The soil mass boundary is semi-infinite, elastic, half space. The load is applied over a level surface. The soil mass is weightless. So what does it mean? In the bosonic theory, we are not considering any different stratification. Though we have a subgrade, subbase, base course as a surface layer, we are trying to assume the whole soil mass is of a single layer without any stratification. So that is one of the assumption of the bosonic theory. And the soil is considered to be homogeneous. Whatever the soil mass which you can see at the lower layer of the ground considered to be homogeneous, isotropic, linearly elastic. Linearly elastic means it tries to obey the Hooke's law. Hooke's law in the vertical downward direction. Vertical downward direction due to the applied load. Stress is directly proportional to strain. And the other assumption is the load is going to be applied over the surface on a plane. The load is applied on a level surface and the soil mass is weightless. Okay, in the next slide, what are the limitations? Whatever the assumptions we had made, is it practically true or not? Let us see. The theory presented by Bosniks has resulted in basic fundamental concepts related to the calculation of stresses and deflections of an elastic half space. But the equations based on the Bosnik theory does not provide realistic values, since the soil mass is never ideally elastic and isotropic. The previous assumption what we had considered the soil to be an elastic or isotropic, it fails, because in real practice the soil is not elastic material nor a isotropic material. Hence the Bosnik theory does not provide our stresses to have the realistic values. The pressure distribution may be non-uniform depending on the loading condition, but what we have considered or assumed in the assumption, the pressure distribution is of uniform. But actually speaking, practically speaking, pressure distribution may not be uniform depending on the loading condition. The soil mass is never weightless and homogeneous. We had considered the soil mass to be weightless and homogeneous, but in practice the soil mass is never weightless and never homogeneous. The pavement consists of multiple layers having different thicknesses and material characters. Though we have considered single layer, actually speaking, practically speaking, the pavement will have the different layers or stratification, which is practically untrue to assume that the soil is of single layer. Therefore, the layered theories which consider multiple layers of pavement with different material characteristics have more significance for the design and analysis of the pavement structure. What does it mean? Instead of considering the soil mass to be of single layer, it is better to consider the different layers to be existing above the soil subgrade, so that to have the realistic values and to have more significant results for the design and analysis of the pavement structures. Thank you.